Everyone, it's Emily Fox. Today's video is going to be all about the best completed fantasy series that I have read during my time on Booktube. I feel like preparing for this video made me realize that, first off, there are plenty of series that I've started that are not completed yet, so you can binge read them. And also, I am not the best at finishing them. I'm working on it. I mean, I'm currently reading book 3 in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. So, I'm working on it, but I decided to do a top 5-ish, and then I'm going to include some special mentions at the end. Definitely leave me some recommendations in the comment section because I'm always trying to get more fantasy. I'm finally really back into reading it. So let's start with the top 5-ish. Oh, by the way, I'm also planning on doing a second video where I will be talking about the best standalone fantasy. So I will link that in the description box once it's out. It wouldn't be a favorite fantasy series video without mentioning Brandon Sanderson, specifically the first Mistborn trilogy. This is one of the first ones that I read during my time on Booktube, and it absolutely blew my mind, especially the end of the last book. I didn't know what the Sanderson avalanche, I think people are calling, until this book. I feel like you get to see how every piece of the world building, the magic system, the political system, all falling into place. Everything was planned, everything makes sense, and it just blows your mind. I really enjoyed the world building and the magic system based on metals. So basically, in order for people to use the magical powers, they have to ingest these metals to burn them. And I liked how structured it is. It feels quite rigid, but not in a bad way. I feel like, okay, if you can use that specific power, you can only push on metal, or you can only pull on metal. Like, it's very, very specific. So I feel like it doesn't become too easy. I feel like that can be a thing with some fantasy books. So it definitely still feels very difficult. I enjoy the characters. I do agree that it's not his strength. I feel like he has improved once again if I compare to most recent books, but I still really enjoyed it. I was invested. I think a lot of people were shocked at the end of book 1. And then you continue being shocked with the rest of the series. I do feel like book 2, there are some slower moments, and I did spoil myself the ending because I read the back of book 3 accidentally, thinking it was book 2. So, but even with all of that, this is a 5-star series. Absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend. It's not the first books I would read by Sanderson. I feel like everyone says starts there. It's too much. But if you want to read one of his series and it's completed, you can binge read the whole thing. It's so popular and it's for a reason. So this is definitely something that I would recommend a ton. The next series I need to mention is the Jade Saga by Fonda Lee. I absolutely adore this series. The first book being Jade City. Somehow I waited 3 years before continuing. I don't know why I did that, because I read the next 2 within the same month because I really wanted to know. First off, the strength of the series, the characters. The characters. I feel like book 1 I read it and I enjoyed myself, but I really loved the characters. Probably why it took me 3 years to continue. Let's not talk about it. But in this world, people were comparing it a little bit to Godfather with like Kung Fu. So the people from this island, some of them can actually carry jade, magical jade that lets them use magical powers, but there are certain limits. Obviously, the stronger you are, the more you can carry it, but it can drive you crazy if you're not strong enough. And it's a little bit like mafia-esque. You have these 2 gangs trying to fight for control over the city. So that's why at first I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it. And by the end of book 1, I was like, okay, I enjoy this. I was emotionally invested. And eventually when I continued, that's when I fell completely in love with this series, because once again, the characters, I've cared so much. And like, Fonda Lee, it's on site, okay? You broke me to pieces at the end of this series. I mean, every book, really, every book you get a shocking ending. You just get so much revealed, so many things are happening, so much political intrigue, and it becomes like the world becomes bigger and bigger, and you're following this family for like years and years and years, and it's just heartbreaking. I'm not over it, okay? Book 3, I'm still just, I liked it so much that I read the 2 novellas, which I don't often read those, but again, I was so invested. And one of them is actually prior to the series. You have to read them at the end, but you get them, you know, young and happy before all the trauma. So yes, I highly recommend this series. Honestly, this is easily one of the best series that I finished, and I'm still shocked that I didn't continue right away. So if you've read book 1 and you liked it and you're not 100% sold on it, please do it. Continue. It's so good. Speaking of trauma, the Puppy War series. Come on. First book being the Puppy War. Once again, another book that I feel like it starts very small and then becomes global war. In the first book, you're following at first this main female character. She is very, very unhappy living with family that are abusive, and she is super focused into making it into this school, this military school. And there's a bit of magic in the beginning, but not as much as, you know, it becomes bigger and bigger. In this world, people that can use magical powers have this connection with the gods, and again, drives them crazy, which I'm noticing kind of a common theme, but that's cool. What's crazy about this one is it's probably one of the darkest one in this video because it is inspired by real like war events. And it's about one theme of the book is about colonialism. So it's definitely very dark, but what I really liked is that the main female character is questionably morally gray. Which I feel like I've read some bad reviews about this book, and often it's because they can't stand her because she is not necessarily a good person, but she went through so much trauma that I don't feel like you should expect her to act normal. Also, I know a lot of people don't like any romance in their fantasy books. This will not contain like spicy scene in any way. There's some love interest at first. You're not sure what's going to happen, but don't worry. It's definitely not that kind of book. It's definitely strictly fantasy. And I got to the end and I was so shocked. Once again, a crazy ending. I can't say I was happy with it, but it was the ending that we needed. There's nothing worse than reading a whole series and you get to the ending and it's disappointing. So definitely will not. He will definitely not disappoint. But yes, definitely look up some trigger warnings if you are someone that needs to do that, because there are definitely a few scenes like just from book one that are quite intense. But yes, once again, very much war against other people that are trying to control their continent, and some really cool magic and morally gray female character. So love this. Next series that I needed to mention is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, another fantastic series that you've probably seen on list and deserves the hype. The first book being the 5th season, and in this world, it's almost a mix of fantasy and a little bit sci-fi, because 5th season is referring to like the world ending for the 5th time. Like it's a season that it's like things are going crazy, and in that world, people that do have magical powers are persecuted. They're sent to this magical school, but it's not really a positive thing. And the main female character is hiding the fact that she has powers. She got married, she had kids, and her husband doesn't know. So one day she is out of the house and her youngest, her son, uses magic. So her husband kills him and then kidnaps and runs away with their daughter. So the series is essentially about her trying to get her back. So if you like female rage, revenge kind of story, you get that in here, which I don't feel like anyone mentions whenever they're talking about this series. It's definitely part of the storyline. And then you eventually learn more about the world building and the magic system through the eyes of this main female character looking for her. And great world building and magic system. But I think that one thing that takes off people is the fact that the writing can be a little weird, because some of the point of view is through the second person. So you. Eventually things make sense, but it did take me a little while to get used to it. English is not my first language, so that could be part of it. But this was fantastic. Again, another satisfying ending, and I just read the whole thing so quickly. Loved it. Do recommend. It's worth the hype. But also in general, I thought it was a really good mix of like sci-fi fantasy. I don't see it often enough. Last but not least, for the official top 5, I wanted to mention is Dark Materials, which I let someone borrow my copy. I'm hoping it's going to come back in perfect condition. This is a series that I grew up reading, but I reread it as an adult on Booktube, so it counts. And I loved it just as much as an adult. I feel like partially probably because of nostalgia, I'm aware, but I feel like it used to be sold as like a children's story, and as an adult, I can tell you a lot of it went way, way above my head. So while you are following a young character, I don't think this would be strictly YA, at least to me. So the first book you're following in this magical version of Oxford, people have demons, which is like their soul, like half their soul in like an animal form. So when you're a kid, they can change shape. And then when you go through puberty, they stop. And the main female character, Lyra, she definitely did not have a normal childhood. But one day people start disappearing. Children are being kidnapped, and she goes on a mission because her friend got kidnapped. And there's a giant talking bear, which now I'm realizing is sounding really children's book, but it's really not. It becomes so much more than this. There was a lot of controversy when this came out because it seems to be like religious people were saying, oh, it's against God. But I feel like the book does have a strong social commentary against organized religion, which like there's a distinction. So I get why it was controversial. But again, as an adult, I feel like there was so much more that I got out of it than I did as a child. So yes, as a kid though, the ending of that trilogy broke my heart. I remember just crying, and I only read the last book once because but would recommend. I liked it a lot. Now, let's talk about a few special mentions because some more series are definitely worth reading. I recently finished the Tealing series, the first book being The Queen of the Tealing, and this is also kind of controversial because a lot of people hated the last book, and I completely understand because if I had known that that was the ending, I wouldn't have read it. But I feel like sometimes you hate, certain tropes, for example, and when you get to read them, sometimes you have an exception. And I feel like to me, this would be the exception. So, book one is very much like a classic normal fantasy book. You have this princess who was hidden away when she was a baby. Her mother was murdered. Her uncle's on a throne trying to keep control over it. So, for her own safety, she grew up hidden away like that. And there's this other queendom, really, who is constantly attacking them. The magic system is intriguing. It's very much a classic fantasy. And then book two becomes quite different, almost like a different genre. And eventually things start making sense and you get to the ending of the series, which I personally liked. But I know that not everyone is going to like it, but I still think it's worth mentioning because I do enjoy it quite a bit. So this is another series that I did like that is fully out and completed, so you can binge read it. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I did read the whole trilogy. I think book three was the weakest one, which is why it's not part of the top 5. I feel like I wasn't 100% satisfied with the way it ends. I know there are technically more books, but I feel like I kind of resent whenever a book or a series is like labeled as a trilogy and then it becomes more and more and more. I still really liked it, mainly because of Glokta. He's one of my favorite characters. I really like the idea of like a hero that becomes almost a villain because he went through so much trauma. So you're following him as one of the point of views, and he was definitely my favorite. So quick shout out, definitely worth picking up also. That one is also very much classic fantasy, people fighting, magic system. It was good. Okay, now the next 3. I wasn't sure if I was going to include it in this version, the series version, or the standalone version, because I would read them as standalone, but they're technically series. So I kind of divided books. It's just more recommendation. It doesn't really matter. For example, Legends and Lattes. So technically it's one book, but there is a prequel. So like, this is an adult fantasy cozy book. So if you enjoy library, books, tea, coffee, this is really what you get in here. The main character is an orc, and she was working as a mercenary. That was definitely something she wanted to do her whole life, which you see in the prequel. And at this point, she's sick of it. She wants to retire, so she takes all the money she has made and she buys this shop in this town, and she opens a coffee shop. Nobody's heard of coffee in that world, and she's trying to, get people to come to the store, building it, and it's just cute and cozy. It was great. There's definitely a lot of hype behind this, and I enjoyed it. It made me realize that I can enjoy cozy fantasy. Another one that took me by surprise is Garden Spells, which, again, this is the Waverly Family series. I did read First Frost, which is the follow-up, the sequel. So it is a series, but I would read it as a standalone. But it's a series. This one reminds me so much of Practical Magic. If you liked a movie, there is a book. I don't love the book as much as the movie. I feel like this is better. So if you want something that like that, but better, I would recommend this one. So you have these 2 sisters. One of them left the small town as quickly as she could, and she is living basically a wild life and gets in a bad relationship. So in order to escape it, she goes back to the small town. And then you have the other sister who never left, who's really happy with her little life in that small town. And it's definitely fantasy romance, but also just good vibes. Honestly, really cozy, really nice. If you are looking for something like, we're in the summer going to fall, I feel like this is perfect for that. So really cute vibes. Love that. And I also wanted to give a quick shout out to the Evanfall Witches B&B series. That cover, every time I show it, I know some people really love it. I would have never picked this. I don't know why I picked it up. I had heard good vibe, cozy fantasy, and I wanted to try it. And you do get that. So again, Practical Magic, Sabrina, The Apprentice Witch, or like Gilmore Girls a little bit. You have these witches in that small town that run a B&B. And her 2 aunts are basically the ones doing it. And one of them one day says that she wishes the only client that is there, would just... And the next day she's found dead. So you have a little bit of like the gossip, the small town, the murder mystery, but it's also about some more serious topics. The main female character is going through grief, and you have the magic, and it was good. Again, cozy. It was fun. I do think it's worth reading. I did read the second book, and I did also enjoy it, but less than the first one. That's why I'm saying you can read it as a standalone, but I really liked it. This cover just makes me cringe every time though, so... Don't be fooled. I still think it's worth reading. Again, we're going towards fall, so this would be perfect. So this would be my top 5 fantasy series that are completed, that I loved and wanted to recommend, plus the special mention. Like I said, I'm in the middle of so many, so I will be trying to make it my mission to catch up and finish more. Maybe I'll do a part 2 eventually. Definitely leave some in the comment section if there are other series that you think are worth binge reading. Give it a thumbs up so I know you enjoy this. Subscribe if you don't want to miss out. I'm doing, like I said, a standalone version. I'll put more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I will see you in an upcoming video very soon. Bye.